Linn-Mar School Board regular meeting will be called to order at 5 p.m. in the boardroom of the Learning Resource Center. Can you please take roll to determine a quorum?
Buckles.
Here.
Morey.
Here.
Nelson.
Here. She's not here. Somebody else sent her
Longer.
in.
Here.
Walker.
Here.
Wall.
Here.
And Weaver.
Here.
Quorum is present.
Thank you.
I move to adopt the agenda as presented. Second.
Motion by Clark and a second by Matt. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We're going to kick off tonight with our special recognition segment. We have a special recognition of Tejas Gururaja. Did I get it? Practiced. It's a Linn-Mar senior, and I'm going to save the rest of it for Mr. Bugowitz to introduce Tejas to us.
Good evening. I think I hit a button. I hope not. Good evening. My name is Trent Bugowitz, and I'm one of the choir directors at the high school. Before I start, I just want to say a quick thank you to Shannon and the board for your determination and diligence over the last 3 years. Our district has been and continues to be tested, and I'm extremely thankful to work in and have a group of people in this room who are ready to stand up and defend our students in our district. So thanks. I'm here today to introduce an honor received by one of our students in our department, Tejas Gururaja. Tejas is a senior in our department and actively participates in both orchestra and choir. He's in both the top curricular orchestra and choir, one of the concert masters in the orchestra, a 1-year member of the All-State Orchestra, a 2-year All-State vocalist, a 3-year member of the Varsity Show Choir, and a jazz piano player in the Colton Center Jazz Ensemble. To put it simply, Tejas takes part in everything he can, all while remaining at the top of his class academically. As well as being involved in school music ensembles, Tejas actively hones and develops his skills outside of school with private teachers in all of his different disciplines. He studies private voice with Dr. Bradley Barrett, a fantastic voice teacher in the area. This year, Tejas competed at the state, local, and national levels of the National Association of Teachers of Singing, it's called NATS, Classical Solo Competition. This association and competition is regarded as the pinnacle representative body of classical solo singing in the United States. I myself, as well as many collegiate voice students in the country, competed in these competitions at some point during my training. I was just not as successful as Tejas was. After qualifying with medal finishes in the state and regional rounds, Tejas competed at the national level this past month and was awarded first place in his division. I couldn't think of a student more deserving of this honor when considering his work ethic and dedication. A huge congratulations to Tejas Gururaja.
Yep.
You can say it right now. The camera really see you.
Yeah, you need to come out and just say hi to the camera.
Say hi to the camera.
All right, just wave to the camera.
Wave the camera.
Congratulations.
So the whole district gets to
Yeah,
see
thank
it.
you.
So thank you for coming tonight. I know it was, just for 5 minutes, but congratulations.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Wow.
Right.
That's cool.
Okay, at this time, we'll do audience communications. I will call those who have signed up to speak to the microphone in the order that they have signed up. We will receive, as a board, and acknowledge comments, but we will not engage in dialogue with the speaker because of the set agenda for the meeting. Remarks are limited to 3 minutes per speaker and should be shared in a respectful manner. We have Kurt Hancock.
Thank you. Kurt Hancock from Mount Vernon. And myself. Okay. In 1976, during U.S. Air Force basic training, I was taught that my duty is to love and serve God, love and serve country, and love and serve my family, in that order. And I really didn't appreciate the significance of that order until later when I read what Benjamin Rice wrote about public schools. Benjamin Rice was one of our founding fathers, and he was tasked with the development of our public school system. He wrote that the purpose of our public schools is to teach our children, among other things, to love and serve God, love and serve country, and love and serve family, in that order. And he received pushback. People said family comes before country. He said no. Keep in mind that he just came through the Revolutionary War, and he experienced true tyranny and knew what tyranny does. He said that we must teach our children to love and serve God, love and serve country, love and serve family in that order, because if you lose your country, it will become the enemy of your family. And I saw that happen here last spring when this school board passed the transgender policy. My country became the enemy of my family. And I know those are harsh words, so why do I say it? What's made our country great for over 200 years are our founding principles. And one of our bedrock founding principles is the traditional biblical family structure. One man, one woman, married, committed to each other for life, bringing up their children in the way they should go. The promotion and encouragement of this transgender lifestyle and the promotion and encouragement of the resulting homosexual lifestyle destroys this family structure. This is not teaching our children to love and serve God, love and serve country, or love and serve their family. This is teaching them to love and serve themselves, and that family does not matter. And if this continues, this will destroy our nation as we know it. It will fundamentally change America. People, fundamentally change America. Maybe that's the goal, and we cannot let that happen. We must return to teaching biblical values in our public schools. I was taught those in public schools as a young child. We're supposed to be teaching those in public schools, and we can go back to teaching them. Thank you, and lots more to come.
Thank you for still honoring that. I did have somebody sign it last minute because I thought I was going to be a minute late, so I do appreciate that. My name is Geraldine Jones, and I stand here and tell you that I used to stand here and tell you that I had 2 kids enrolled in the district. That is no more due to our lack of trust in the district leadership. We have moved to homeschooling. At one point, Ms. Wells said they won't leave, and if they go, they'll be back because they'll just see this at another school. That mentality is troublesome for a parent to hear, because that isn't leadership. That isn't leadership, and that means that they don't take their role seriously. I now stand before you as not only a taxpayer, but also the chair of the new Linn County chapter of Moms for Liberty, who is just getting started here with Linn-Mar. We have a school district that takes over 44% of our property taxes and is making decisions that is not in the best interest of the community, not just those that have children that attend the district. So we do have a voice. As the chair for Moms for Liberty, I have a lot of truth to bring forward, and that is a promise that I will continue to do. One of those things is asking questions, like why hasn't Linn-Mar been honest with the district, the community, and anybody going forward about the ransomware attack? Why are we signing contracts that brings motivational speakers in, that is speaking on social emotional learning? That is what they strive for. If you just look at their YouTube videos, it's going to be alarming. Why are we talking about that just 2 weeks, less than 2 weeks, before this is supposed to be spoken at our schools, when the contract says that 50% is supposed to be due at signing? So that means that, I guess I would like some elaboration maybe on if you did have to put that 50% down up front, because that would mean you'd have to put $5,500 up front when it wasn't even voted on, to my knowledge, that this is going to be happening. So if we can have some clarification on that, because to me that's not a smart financial decision, is to pay that up front without it being approved, the contracts being approved. And it's supposed to happen on the 12th and the 13th of September. So I'd like some clarifications on that. I do promise to bring truth to the district and to all the parents, and not only just the taxpayers, but everybody else in the community and surrounding school districts, because parents deserve to know what is happening at their schools, even if their children no longer attend. Thank you.
Thank you to those who came and spoke this evening. We'll move on to informational reports, discussions, and presentations. We do have an agenda change. Carla is out ill, so we're going to postpone the HR update until our next board meeting. So we'll move straight to Nathan's student achievement report.
And Bob, too.
Bob, sorry.
There you go.
Nathan and Bob.
All right, so good evening. We're excited to talk to you a little bit about getting a data snapshot just of where we're at. So if you remember the last couple of years, it's been kind of a hot mess with Iowa assessments and COVID and not having test results. But actually this year we do to start the fall. So we're in a much better spot than we have been. So, but before we start, I just want you to think, board members, about a student that you've seen. So it could be a student of your own, could be somebody you saw on a board visit, maybe it's a face you remember from being out in the schools, or maybe it's even a picture of a kid in your mind that you've worked with in the past. So I just want you to think about that kid. What are your hopes for that student? What would you like that student to see? So, you know, often as we go through school, our role as kind of supporting our buildings and our teachers and our administrators is to help this concept of our kids, like we're collectively responsible for our kids, not just my kids in my class, not just kids in this grade or this building, but all of our kids. So I want you to put, or we want you to put that picture in that fourth box there where there's that question mark. So just as we talk data, remember that there's kids' faces. Pulled some pictures from the website there, some of our kids and teachers over the last couple years. So as we review that, if you do have questions, I mean, we want to keep this fairly informal too, so if you have questions, let us know as we jump into that.
On the screen, you see the methods of assessment that we're going to discuss tonight. The FAST literacy is required K-6 by the state. ISAP is required also, 3 through 11. And then additionally, in your handout, you have the conditions for learning survey that is sent out to our students as well as our parents. Gives you an overview of those questions. I'll dive in from the elementary level and we'll just kind of work our way up to the secondary level with some of the data that we've had. And I'll preface it, I've been here since 1991. I was a classroom teacher for a long time. And I remember my first time that we even looked at ITBS back then. It was one of those things, we'd look at it, oh, our kids did okay. And then it was done probably till next year. Times has changed dramatically since then. Teachers use this real-time data to make educational adjustments for the students that they serve, thinking about how we can address student needs and really drill down to what each individual kid needs. In our overview today, it's at the 10,000-foot level, but I'll mention some other data metrics that buildings, PLC teams would look at as they go through this data. So first, we'll start with the FAST, and FAST is administered to kindergarten through 6th grade. I gave an overview. The top is Linn-Mar Community School Districts. That's 9 schools, our 7 elementaries, and our 2 intermediates. The healthy indicator number 1 is just the goal of having 95% of the kids screened, and FAST is a screener as far as an assessment. It casts a wide net. You can see how we compare to Grant-Wood AEA, and then the state of Iowa below. So that's where we were at the fall. The next slide is where we're at the spring. So you can see that we gained some traction. We didn't quite meet that goal of 80%, but then again, there's the Grant-Wood AEA comparison and the Iowa state comparison that goes along with it, just to kind of give you a mark to compare to. The next slide gives you some FAST grade level from this last year. So we have kindergarten all the way through 6th grade. You could,
In that first column, like 99% of students have taken it?
Yes.
Versus, okay.
Yep. Good question. Thank you for clarifying that.
Right column is
The right column
their
is-
performance.
Yeah, their achievement
Oh,
level.
is their performance?
Yeah.
Okay.
Meeting
Okay.
the benchmark of 80%. And
Okay.
as the year progresses, those benchmarks increase. It's not just the same benchmark in the fall, winter, and spring. So we do this testing 3 times a year.
What is the benchmark? So what is it saying? Like, what's that rating?
It's your fluency on a passage. I can't.
Okay, so it's
take
a
those on.
fluency
Yeah, it's a
benchmark,
fluency
okay.
screen. Yep.
On the benchmark, so like the elementary benchmark, it's something like 25, 50, and then 80, something in that range. Can you explain the benchmark? Because from my understanding, the benchmark is actually only like 50% proficient and not, can you explain how those benchmarks work?
I wish I could explain how those benchmarks work because I have enough knowledge to be dangerous and misquote that. So I will send you some information on that after this. I just wanted to provide an overview of where we're at. I understand that question.
Well, the reason I ask is because if the benchmark is only 50% proficiency in reading, as long as they're meeting that benchmark, they could still be significantly lower than, actually where they should be, but that doesn't signal an intervention. So I would like to learn how we address the kids that aren't at the top, but they're just meeting that benchmark, but that benchmark is really only 50% proficient.
Okay, I'm going to jump ahead to some other metrics that we look at, and this may help you a little bit.
Sure.
With this overview, I'm just doing this screening, and this is not in my slides, but at the building, we'd still look at the percent meeting benchmark at each thing at grade level. They also look at the students that have met benchmark and stay at benchmark each assessment time. They also look at, I'm not at benchmark now, but I am after that. And then we do the subgroup comparisons with that also. So I hope that clarifies it a little bit, but you're exactly right. I could be one word over the benchmark the whole time, but we'll still look at that student growth to see how much they're growing in between those sessions. Okay. We've got a lot of students that maybe didn't meet our benchmark, but we can really look at their growth. They may have come from way far to getting almost there. And that's what the data teams and building teams look at as they disseminate this data, if that helps clarify a little.
It's a little bit tricky to think of it as a percentage like we normally do, like percent proficient. I don't think it's set up that way because when it's based on words per minute and fluency, it's based on how much frustration they experience during reading, and there's a set metric for that. We can look at what that is, but it doesn't mean they got like half of them right or wrong.
That was just the wording that it was used to explain to me.
Like based on the average reader, so many words per minute would put you at not a frustration level with this many words, and so that's kind of where we're trying to get kids toward.
Again, this test is a screener. If Nathan was having reading problems, we'd administer a series of diagnostics to really pinpoint what those may be. What we have next is just a grade level. This is where we were in the fall, and you can see that we're really meeting that percentage of the numbers that we're screening of students, and that's what the number of students that were at benchmark. And then the spring, that be the comparison with that. The one glitch that you may notice is our kindergarten. Our kindergarten didn't make the growth that we expected them to. All other grade levels grew at that time. This is not indicative of it. If I would have done historical data the year before that, we grew. So this is not a cohort comparison either. So that's something that we'll keep examining and looking at. So FAST is one of them, and then we'll switch to ISASB. Our district data is on top, and the yellow is, as you can see, not yet proficient, proficient, and advanced. Our most recent score is the top bar compared to one academic year ago.
Don't remember, ISASB is the the new version of ITBS, Iowa Assessments. Now it's called ISASB. So.
And really, it's almost comparing apples and oranges because these aren't the same children that we're looking at. The third graders that we have, as you see in this slide, are being compared to last year's third graders. So if we move one slide forward, that would be our fourth grade data. So if we started looking at cohort, that'd be a different way that we could sort that and look at those things. With this being, just recent test, with it being taken solely on a device, I like to look at a series of data points rather than just one or two. I think we have a start of looking at a trend, but it's early yet to make too many conclusions for that.
All right, so one of the things we did this summer is all the UEN schools just wanted to kind of compare data because, when you look at this and you see the percent proficient, for us it's always like as compared to what? Because, our UEN partners at least would not have, nobody's at 100%, right? And so what this allowed us to do is kind of see our overall data. We're still combining that with the UEN schools. There were several and hadn't updated that yet as of the start of the year. But you can just see this is basically all the slides that we're going to show of the ISASB grade level comparison, but in a nice chart where you can see it in one spot. So it just shows the grade. The number is the N number, the number of kids tested, so you can see how many students were in each grade that we tested. And then the percent proficient. The pink or purple column there, the first two columns are English language arts. Math is next. And then science, if you notice, the reason why it's only in 5, 8, and 10 is because those are the only grade levels that are required to test in science. We don't test every grade level in science.
I'm assuming this is the same thing, the percent proficient isn't really percent proficient, it's the percent meeting benchmark, correct?
Yeah, it would be the number of kids, so like third grade, 74% in ELA, it'd be the number that either proficient or advanced on these slides. So it's a total number of kids that were at a proficient level on the test. Does that answer your question?
And that number is different than the benchmark number on the previous slide, or it's the same?
Yes, good question, because this is actually measuring question item standards from the curriculum. So, you know, I don't know how many items there were, maybe 35 to 40 for ELA, roughly per test. And so what they do is there's metrics that Iowa Testing used to come up with a scale score. And so they have a cutoff of however many you do get right is the level of proficiency. And that varies a little bit by subtest, ELA, math, or science, and by grade as far as what that cut score is. But yes, those are more item-based, so based on how many kids got those answers right. It used to be, if you remember, the old Iowa assessments used to have the 41st percentile on the national percentile rank, I think it was, national percentile rank if you were above that. Well, that was always tough because it's a norm reference test, so you were comparing how your kid did against other kids, which was constantly a moving target. This is actually based off of, supposed to be based off of core standards that we're teaching in each of the grade level bands. Good question, though. So I'll go through and just highlight, here's a first look at 5th grade that did science. So again, you can see, like Bob mentioned, that it's not matching cohorts, but just over year to year, we like to see where our kids are at with that. Obviously, last year was really interesting data for us because it was kind of the first year after not testing with COVID and then having some more results from this new test, so we were able to see that. Then this is the 1st grade level where we're able to see the science in 5th grade. It's also a good measure for us as you look at compared to the state, because there's a lot, you know, we're a lot better than the state average on science. And that's something I know that content area we continue to look at with the science kits that we get from Grant Wood and some of the curriculum that we use there. Here's a look at 6th grade. Yeah. Yeah, science is still pretty interesting because at least when it's always nice for Bob and I because we kind of help cover the buildings and get to go out and proctor if there's shortages or be in the test situation so we can see. Science is still a lot of reading. So it's very heavy reading comprehension. They're trying to do more like content pieces that would focus on, hey, here's a set of data, you got to manipulate this table. So I don't know if that's part of the reason that it's still ELA heavy. I do know, though, that for this next testing year, so when we test in the spring, it'll be the first year that we have adaptive scores, and that'll be something all new that we talk about to you next year, is because that will then change test items based on how kids answer. So I don't know if that'll give us a little bit a better measure with that. We've also noticed just, you know, at the elementary, we're prioritizing math and literacy in our schedule. We still work on science and social studies. But, you know, the minutes aren't always maybe equal between those content areas. So it's more to look at like what our content pieces are teaching, kind of those main units in science, so that we make sure kids have access to those. So when Bob talked about this is kind of the 10,000 foot level, our buildings are now looking at this information, like are they seeing subgroup populations that aren't experiencing success with any of these tests, and they're able to do a much better granular analysis with that data at the building level. Yeah, I don't think so, because like looking at the state, just comparing scores, because I'm always anxious when these come out and just looking at I mean, our approach isn't really any different than any other district's approach with science scores. Ours, maybe we're the same, if not a little bit better than some of our other districts. And I would say we have similar approaches to instructional minutes for those areas. You know what I mean? But no, I'm not aware of any specific research on that.
Especially the younger levels, though, that elementary focus on literacy and math as a priority area. Because if you can't read and be successful there, it's not going to carry over to science as you get older, obviously, too. And it is interesting to see because it's not just Linn-Mar scores that aren't as good as reading and math, but definitely the state scores are significantly lower as well, which is always interesting to try to put a why to that is sometimes challenging.
My question is, when you look at the 3 grades that we test in science, you know, elementary was at 72, 5th grade was 73, and then 10th grade or 8th grade was 73, and then 10th grade was 63. When they start having science every day and it gets more specific, our scores are going down. So, you know, at the elementary level, they have science for 6 weeks and they switch to social studies for 6 weeks. And in my mind, you know, less minutes, but our scores are higher than when we have more concentrated time spent on science. So that's where my question, I had some of that written down. That's where my continual questions about science are is, what are we missing as we spend more time on science? And maybe it's what is education missing if we're not the only school seeing this. I would echo Rachel's question about, you know, what does the research say that, you know, would help kids better understand science?
I think we just keep working on the rigor of that. Obviously, the NGSS, which is the national standards for science that Iowa adopted, are much more rigorous than maybe what we've been used to seeing in the past. And I think we just need to keep having that discussion with our content facilitators, our curriculum leaders, our department heads. You know, one thing that's interesting about the high school too is that because we do block at the high school, some of those kids aren't through their second semester class. We tested early April with the high school. We're actually going to push that back some into later April this year, just because there are probably some grade level content standards that kids didn't get exposed to if they had science second semester versus first semester.
And that makes sense. We
And
see
that's
that.
just our, yeah.
We see that with the ACT as well, is
Right.
that when juniors take it, they haven't got all
Yep.
the content yet, so their scores may be lower.
So the state gives us a window. We try to pick the later, there's 2 windows you can do. We try to pick the latest of the second window basically so that we can maximize instructional time within the school year before we test. Yes, Clark.
Did you say there's a correlation between the science and the reading? And are they, obviously, the test people that design the test, has that been communicated to maybe change some of the questions that the kids receive to kind of counteract that difference, or?
That's an interesting question. So Iowa Testing did extensive field testing before they started, and they actually had, you know, like their, I don't know what they're called, psychometric, like math type statistical people that actually developed the test. But they did do a lot of partnership with districts. In fact, I remember the year they sent out the call to be able to have teachers help write the test. So there was more teacher input on that. There's a lot of information on the Iowa Testing page that talks about how much it's correlated with those types of things. That still is something I question sometimes because it still seems like there's a certain amount of test materials that are supposed to be like really hard questions versus easy questions. And that was maybe what we were trying to move away from with the old Iowa Test of Basic Skills. So yes, there's been educator input. Science people worked on these questions. Every year they continue to field test questions that we don't know which those are, but they may not count in their score just so they can test out if, like, how did kids respond to that question? And I know the test designers work on that.
Well, my only thing is I hope the ones that are making up the questions, that are teachers or whoever's making those up, know what you presented to us just before, is that there is a difference in lower science scores due to the students' lack of reading experience. And it would seem that if you have teachers designing that, they need to know before they devise the question, that there is that possibility, you know, that the scores will be lowered because of that, and maybe make some adjustments. I think it might be able to give you a clearer picture.
I think you get that crossover
That's
with
just
math
off the top
too,
of my
that
head.
there's a lot of science-related things that you have to be able to have the basics of graphing or other mathematical expertise in order to be able to answer those science questions. So I think the science questions as a whole, you have to be able to use both your English language skills and your math skills to be able to answer the content piece of science, which makes it that much more difficult for many kids, just in general.
Yes. And if you look at what Melissa was just saying also, if the scores are lower, but yet we do have higher math and higher reading scores than our science, so if you're putting those two together, still, you know, I think the questions that are developed, those people need to understand that correlation that you two have just brought into play, and that is, you know, if students have a lower reading score, yeah, definitely that can impact, like Rachel was saying, the comprehension into the science questions, is all I was saying.
I think it's one of the most difficult areas to measure academically, because if we were truly wanting to have kids pursue science, are they well versed in problem solving? Can they make a hypothesis? Can they set up tests? That's really hard to measure in a standardized test, that scientific procedure and doing those things, because you think of all the different realms of science. We're talking physics, we're talking biology, chemistry. There's a lot of different avenues for that. So, and I agree that academic vocabulary, the academic reading, you know, if I was back in the elementary, I would use my science and my social studies curriculum. That's my nonfiction reading right there. That's what I'm going to do. So, yeah.
I have one other quick question. I know this is new data for you, and so you might not have had the opportunity to do this yet, but do you take a look at like longer term trends, and do you have any perspective yet, the comparison between pre-COVID and current proficiency rates for these subjects? And do you have a sense of where we're at now in comparison? So like the 22% for English language, is that about where we were? Is that higher or lower than where we were pre-COVID? We can see where we were last year, but I'm just curious if we know yet.
That's a great question. It's really hard because those two tests measured completely different things and were normed completely differently. Okay. So it's really hard to compare. Now, I would say when we looked at this data, we were fairly pleased with where our kids were at, because really if you think about, you know, the year we closed down and then the following year when things still weren't feeling quite normal, to have percentages of kids proficient that are pretty close to where we were, I would say, before. I think looking historically, back when I started looking at test scores, you know, we were in the 75 to 80% proficient range. But again, you really can't compare and in fact, Iowa Testing has asked us not to, because the test was so different and set up so different that those results are hard to compare to these results. But that's a great question.
Do you think moving forward we will be able to monitor trend analysis, or do you think that that's something that...
Yeah, so I think moving forward, now that we have these 2 years, this is the years we start monitoring that trend. We can set up cohorts so that we could follow, you know, 3rd grade this year, 4th grade next year, 5th grade the following year. We just didn't want to do that first test year, because then it was first, and then we had no test data. So I don't really want to go back and include that stuff, because that just was such a one-off for us. I think these 2 years would be our starting point to start building those trends. And we can certainly do that. We look at those by cohort so that you can track kids, the same group of kids as they go through school. So I'll just quickly show you 7th, 8th, 9th, or up through high school. Everything's pretty similar in terms of where we're at. Here's 8th grade. Again, science scores on the right there. So again, the yellow would be the students that are not proficient. I wanted to pull in just some other data for you to see some trends from the secondary level, because, you know, like at Bob's level at the elementary, they've got FAST, they've got multiple diagnostics, they've got math and literacy. You know, the high school doesn't always have those different metrics, so I wanted to take a look at AP scores. So this is just fresh. We got those here at the end of the summer. So that graph on the left shows the number of kids that scored a 3+. And help me, if it's 3+, I think they get college credit for an AP? Yes, thank you. So if it's 3+, then they can apply for that college credit. But you can see there where we had an obvious dip for 2 years. But then this year we had 83% of our students tested, which was roughly 400 kids that took an AP test, scored at a 3 or higher. So that's really pretty good. You've heard a lot about venture, but I just wanted to share briefly the update on enrollment. You know, we had 94 kids last year and we're up to 200. We were at 220, but some kids have changed schedules, so I don't know the exact number, but that's great. You can see the strands there that we have. So obviously we have kids. You know, you talk about improving science and having real life connection. Well, we're trying to do that in ventures, so that should be good for us. I put up some Compass and Atlas data there, so I'll let you kind of look at that. I think the thing that I would point out on the left is the history of how many kids we've been graduating from the alternative school. 73 and 76 in the last 2 years is really impressive. We would like to have Steve and his crew probably come present to the board at some point just to talk to you more specifics and what you see on the slides here. But then the Atlas program is a little bit different. So for those of you that don't know, Atlas is the Four Oaks program. So these are kids that are adjudicated to that facility that have to be educated by Linn-Mar. They changed their, and Lisa, you can help me with this too if I don't get this right, but they changed their delivery model where they used to have kids from a certain area, and now we're pulling kids statewide. And often some of the most challenging students that they would have. So they, depending on their needs, they come on site. They get instruction through Compass. We do some online credit recovery for them. But really what's awesome is we had one graduate last year from Atlas, so that's really impressive. I know that's only one, but there's only 9 kids in the class. But then what was interesting this fall is we had multiple students request open enrollment back to Compass because they were in Atlas. They went back to their district, wherever that was, and they're like, but I want to stay at Linn-Mar because this experience was really powerful for me. So that's been good. We've had some good success with that program over here in the basement of this building.
Yeah, I can touch on that one really quick. We were voluntold that we are, because we work through Four Oaks with that program, one of 2 districts in the state of Iowa that we're a pilot program for with this new model. So we weren't given the choice, but it has been fantastic here since January when they changed their model. So like Nathan said, pulling from the state of Iowa, but we have the hardest clientele across the state of Iowa. So we're one of 2 programs piloting this. I would go to bat for our amazing staff down there because one of the things that was pushed by, not by Four Oaks, but by the juvenile court officers and by the Linn County court system is the gentlemen attending down there were to not be released from the Four Oaks site, and our staff, as well as myself, went to bat and said, no, we want them here. We see a huge difference between educating them out there and educating them here. And I just talked with one of the, she's the lead JCO for Linn County, and she said, thank you for going against me. And I've learned something new, and I have learned that you guys know the clientele best and how to best serve them. And they're doing fantastic things, and the state of Iowa is really looking at what they're doing. So it's been great.
Is the change in population because of this process change, or was this our decision to change the population served? How did that come about?
So it's not our choice because this is all 4 Oaks, so this is all about residential and everything like that. This came from money. So when beds and things like that became harder, and then you have your 4 Oaks that they bid on things, it goes through a bidding process, 4 Oaks and other residential things like that, and then there was a huge money shift through the government that forced some new procedures that had to be looked at.
This program now is only serving juvenile court.
Correct. Yes.
Children that are served under juvenile court, they're no longer providing PMIC
there's no
or
PMIC.
long-term foster care. Okay.
Correct.
Because my understanding on that, and I appreciate your comments, was it was not a very successful program trying to teach in the 4 Oaks facility. So pulling them in here has been a huge part of that success, if I understand it.
Yeah, and obviously we've learned through the pandemic just, you know, the online classes, the flexibility that we can have to not have them sit right there to do their class, that we have flexibility on the outside hours has certainly helped this group. And, you know, that's why I put that slide. So as you picture those kids, you know, think these are all our kids, and these kids too are a part of our process and have to measure their success that they're having in our schools. So yes, Lisa's teams have been great. It's been a real positive. Obviously, we have great staff down there that really help these kids too. So that's
Just want
good.
to add something what Lisa said. If we could go back 5 years and look how many people were in Compass compared to what it is now, the people down there have done a tremendous job. Steve has done a tremendous job. Britt and I were leaving a meeting earlier this week, and he was on his way to some home visits. And, you know, I think that's a testament to the people down below and how hard they're working. Do you have an idea of what our total number is? You know, it's grown every year, correct?
Yeah, in Compass, you mean?
Yes.
I think we're right at 100.
I said just under 100. There's 106 now.
Yeah, so thanks, Gayla.
I was going to mention what Barry said too, just to clarify for our newer board members. You may not be aware of this. The change that you were asking about there, Melissa, that was a change initiated by 4 Oaks. But the change we made several years ago is what Barry was describing. We used to send teacher staff to the 4 Oaks facility, provide their education there. That was problematic and not very successful. I think is probably a safe way of saying it. So we made the change and brought the kids here as part of our Compass Atlas program here as well. And we've seen tremendous success since then and change. And then this change happened after that as well. So there's been a series of things. Some things have been outside of our control and some things that we have made differences as well. So just want to make sure you guys are aware that that has looked different over the last, I can't remember if that was maybe 3 years ago, roughly.
Something like that.
Something like that too. So it was a good example of looking at our data, looking at our situation, and making adjustments to meet the needs of our kids because it was not successful in the other route, and it's been nothing but successful now. So that was looking back, one of our better decisions we made.
All right, moving on, here's one more data points. This is comparing the last 2 years. I'll explain this real quick. This is Kirkwood's concurrent enrollment data. So anytime a student takes a college level class, the registration type, there's different strands that kids can take. But last year we had 469 students, which was 20% of our high school enrollment, that took almost 2,800 credit hours, which was a tuition savings of over 500,000 for our families. So I like to throw this in because it's always interesting. Kirkwood sends us out every year to all the high schools. We are by far of the metro high schools have the biggest number of dollar savings for families. But that's huge because if kids do a career academy where they take 4 classes as a junior and want to do another academy as a senior, they can get upwards of, almost 20 credits probably by the time they leave high school. And the school district, through the supplemental weighting agreement that we have with the state, pays for those courses. So I emailed Kirkwood just today, and thankfully Christy Black got back to me. She's the dean. I wanted our stats for this year. So this past year, so that was 2 years ago at the top. This past year we had 450 unique students, so we went down a little bit in the number of students, but you can see they took more credit hours. So our tuition savings to families last year was $551,000. So really in 2 years of Kirkwood classes, our Linn-Mar families have saved over $1 million in post-secondary tuition. So,
Nathan?
Yes. Go Barry or whoever first.
What do the demographics of that look like?
I don't know. it's everything. I mean, it's the alternate concurrent enrollment classes can be any one-off high school classes. The CTE stuff is all your welding, your automotive academies.
I'm sorry,
Kid
perhaps that-
demographics?
Correct.
Yeah,
Who are the kids who are taking those college classes? What do they look like? What are they, are they college bound? Are they Kirkwood bound to
Yeah,
do
good
some kind
question.
of trade school? What are the,
Yeah, I
the
don't have
racial
that at my fingertips,
demographics?
but we would have that. Our counselors would have
Okay.
that information.
I can briefly, I don't have the specific numbers, but it would be a mix of everything you just said, because the CTE kids might go straight into employment because you can get a welding certificate while you're in high school and then go straight into the workforce. Some of the other CTE academies could lead into the Kirkwood equivalent program or a trades apprenticeship. And then some of the arts and sciences would be part of your general education for a more traditional 2-year or 4-year transfer enrollment degree. So it's really
I'm
a mix.
guessing it really reflects our typical enrollment, but you know what, that would be a great thing for SIAC to look at. We might want to add that on our November agenda meeting just to break this down a little bit more. I'm sure with 21% of our kids, the demographics here are very similar to what we see at the high school, but I could be wrong. We need to look
I
at
mean,
that.
if you could send that to me, I'd be really interested, and then we could talk more about it at the SIAC committee
Yeah.
meeting.
That sounds good. Barry, were you going to add something?
It was just one quick question. So the state pays the full Kirkwood fees, or are there some charges to the families?
The state doesn't quite reimburse the full fee, but it's really close. I don't know what the percentage is for sure, but every year when we certify enrollment, you'll see a supplemental weight. And so we go through and we count all these kids. So every course that they take has a little teeny weighting, a percentage behind it. That all gets added in as an additional FTE that we submit at count date to get reimbursed for most of those. There is no cost to families. The only place where we may not break even is with the cost of books. And I just heard from Kirkwood, like the nursing one has a $295 book, which is ridiculous because that's almost the cost of a college credit. And so we're losing money on that course because we have to pay $295 for a book and $385 per credit hour or whatever it is through Kirkwood. So, but for the most part, we get most of that back. Families don't have to pay unless a kid takes a course and fails it, and then there's a reimbursement process for that. But
I think one of the benefits to us as a district, though, is that then we also don't have to offer some of those courses. And so we're saving money by not having to employ people who can provide those classes that Kirkwood might be able to offer. So I think
or we have Kirkwood certified courses that are taught here,
Yes.
right, that are our own people. And so that's another way, because then that cost is less to us because they're already our own teachers. So it's pretty much a wash. It's good that the state gives us. But as you talk about funding for schools, make sure they don't do anything with supplemental weighting, because that's what this is for. So good
Keep
question.
in mind, these college credit hours are in addition to the AP hours that Nathan showed a slide or two back as well.
Oh, yeah.
Those are two different ways kids can access college credit while they're still in high school.
And the venture is going to have a strand with college credit that we heard about last year. So there's lots of opportunities there. So thanks for letting us kind of share that. Here's a last look at high school. Our high school non-proficient students are a little bit higher this year. I still think we're dealing with some catch-up from COVID, but you can see 9th grade there. 10th grade was a little bit, and we had a lot of students. Bob and I need to kind of dig into 10th grade science there. I'm not sure what's going on with that, but again, we took it in early April too, and some of the students weren't through all their coursework yet, so that could have something to do with it. And then our junior scores. Now, I do think kids are getting to the point where this doesn't mean a lot to them, not that it doesn't or it shouldn't, but I think we need to continue to work with high school staff on that too, just supporting kids, making them buy into this. You know, it's a different schedule on a different day. They don't want to take this test. I'm not blaming anything on our data. Our data is what it is. But Jeff and I have had good discussions about how we can kind of respond and look at those and compare that then to next year to see if we can make some improvements there. So
I think that's a fair, I mean, I do remember certain students talking about
Sure.
the fill in the dot drawings that they would make on their tests. So, I
Yeah.
mean, I think that's a fair thing to consider as well as
we try.
student
but-
motivation.
Ethan, just one last question here. Looking at this spring of 21 versus 22, where I might ordinarily think that 21 would have had higher levels of not yet proficient. Was there a lag? Are we seeing sort of like this COVID lag almost, where like initially? Because do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I
Do you know what I'm
you're
saying?
Yeah, it very well could be. It could be some gaps from before. I don't know. I can't say with definitive proof that that's what it is. I do know anecdotally from our teachers, like last year was even harder than the year before.
Right, that's just kind of what I'm
For lots
kind
of
of wondering.
reasons.
And I know it's not the same students, but
Yeah.
you see that kind of jump and you look, and I would think, oh, we would be doing better last year than we were the year before. So I was just kind of curious.
Well, and if you remember when I presented, like during COVID time, when we talked about that sprinkling in of academics, over the course of this, I think just proves that we still need to go back and hit skills that we didn't quite get that we're going to need to do over our courses. And the teachers did a lot of that last year, because obviously it was finding out where kids were at. Now they've moved on to the next grade level, and we still have some gaps we need to address. So that's going to be a multi-year process as well. So, all right, Bob and I will close with just letting you look at how we're responding. Bob, is there anything you want to add to that?
No, again, I just think we take each of these assessments and it kind of forms a data picture for us. And I think the more that we analyze it and look for trends as we do this a few more years, it will give us a better picture of things that are working well in our district and some things that we need to address, not only this year, moving forward.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
All right, Rachel, do you have a report for us on City Council?
I do, and that is that there is nothing to report.
That's an excellent report. Thank you for sharing.
Short,
Sweet and to the point.
Yeah.
Right. All right, we have a facilities planning update. I know it says Shannon and I are both going to update, but I think it's really just Shannon.
I think it's me. And mine will be not as short as Rachel's update, but will be short. Two things to keep you up to date on. The two projects that are looming right now, in the quickest time frame for us, the tennis courts. We are very close to being ready to move forward with our plans. The only piece we're waiting for right now is the cost estimate between the city parking lot off of Iris Drive to connect to the southeast corner of the tennis courts. So that's the one piece that we are still waiting for, a cost estimate. And then we'll work with the city on what the sharing opportunities there look like financially. I did leave at your tables a kind of an image of what the tennis court layout looks like. You can see it's a little bit different than one of the earlier ones we looked at. It fits the current land really, really well, and also fits well with our coaches and administration to be able to supervise and coach and provide support for our student athletes in that space as well too. So we do have a public hearing tentatively scheduled for September 26th, and then the bidding process to follow shortly after that, and then we can start in the springtime moving forward with that project, assuming the bids come in the way we hope they come in. So excited about that. I'm sorry?
Where are the spectators?
There,
Supposed to be.
this image does not show it yet. There will be, the tentative plans will have bleachers
Here.
by each court area. It'll look a little bit different based on which set of courts you're at. Some will be in different locations, visually built into that as well.
I just remember
And
that
then
was one of
there's
the
going
things
to
we talked about, was there are none here, and oh, by the way, the fence looks great now over here.
And there'll be screens in certain spots there as well for wind, but also areas there's not screens so fans can see through it easier as well too. So yes, that is part of the design, but doesn't quite show up on the map.
I know there was discussion about lights and that we were hoping the city was going to maybe be able to come in and support that, and there's no longer the interest there or the ability with their budget. And so those aren't currently in the plans. Is that going to inhibit our ability to be able to host as many tennis competitions as we might otherwise be able to do? And will that be a long-term budget implication for us from a...
There will be no restrictions to us as far as hosting high school tennis events for boys or girls during the season at all by not having lights. They're all held either during the weekends, during the day, or after school times before it's dark. I can't think of hardly any schools that have that for a competition standpoint. They might have it for access for either school or kids, or for community, but not from a competition perspective. And the cost was becoming extensive for those we're talking. Oh, what was it, Dave, 300,000+ for just a partial lighting of the courts, not even all of the courts as well. So that became a barrier pretty quickly for us.
And you did say, because I asked you about this last week, which is that we do still have the ability down the road, if that was something that we wanted to do, that they could run the electrical from those softball, that since we do have electric that runs out to that.
Correct.
So we're not boxing ourselves in for the future.
If the decision was ever made to add lights, the potential is certainly there with the baseball, softball, current setup with electricity right there. Obviously, the cost would probably be a little more than it is now because everything goes up over time. It's easier to do it up front, but that is a pretty significant cost for something that is a nice to have, is kind of what we decided, not a have to have from a school perspective.
If there's a passionate community member that really wants us to have lights, now would be the time for them to come forward and help make that happen, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
The Melissa Walker lights.
Shields.
Yes.
Shields might want
If they are
to.
serious about that, they better just speak up quickly. So, correct.
Well, this looks great. I think this is really good progress.
I'm excited to see what the city comes up with, or what our engineers come up with for the trail connection to the parking lot, because that is the one piece that's still looming that will be problematic during the spring season with Oak Ridge and baseball and softball and Lau Park and now tennis courts. So we know access to parking will be really important, especially during the spring season too. So looking forward to seeing what that revision, hopefully I'll have that for you by the end of the week to share as well. And then the other one is administrative building. I've had really good conversations with OPN. We're still on schedule to bring a schematic design and a very initial cost estimate to the board for consideration during our next board meeting. I think we'll get that from them later on this week, some better detailed ideas. And once I have that, I'll share that with you as well. And then that'll give us a chance to start to look at more of a specific design going forward, asking them to come with a preliminary design initially and the initial cost to get your level of comfort before we get any farther down the road design process too. But I'm pleased with where that is heading for us as well. So neither one is quite there yet, but I think by the end of this week we'll have some updates and information to share with you as we get closer to the next board meeting.
Any questions? All right. Superintendent's update.
I'll roll right into the next one. Just a lot has happened, I guess, since our last board meeting. We've had new teachers have started, and kids have started. It's been a really good start to the school year. I think the general vibe as you're out in buildings and talking to people, just kind of two things: a lot of excitement, and then kind of a sense of normal. As far as glad to be back in school, excited to be there. Routines have been established pretty quickly. Just lots and lots of good things happening in school and then outside of school in our activities and athletics, fully operational and running again as well too. So it's been really good to get everybody back in the buildings and come to life again too. So just a definite highlight of the last 2 weeks. Construction projects. I think we're in really good shape on all of our summer projects that we had. We have the one project looming that you're well aware of, the stadium turf project. We got some good updates on that over the course of the weekend and even today. They were on site today. The turf has completed production. The underlayment arrived today and was being installed this afternoon. And the turf is on its way from Georgia. Should be here late tomorrow or into early Wednesday with installation to start right after that. Dave and the team have a plan. They can work pretty much as many hours per day they can work, as many days a week we can get work done. I'm planning to have lights on at the stadium if we need to for them to work into the evenings as well, to get things taken care of for the homecoming football game, which will be the second home game of the year, to work through for September 23rd. So keep your fingers crossed, but we're seeing some really good progress there. And hopefully the weather forecast looks good so far as well. So hopefully that will not be a surprise barrier for us either. So
Right now, we look on target for homecoming.
Correct.
That's a safe statement, because I have gotten that question.
as of right now, yes.
Okay.
Yep. And then just a couple of dates I'll put in your calendar, and I will get this out to you as well. But as we start our strategic planning process, one of the things we talked about in our last discussion about that was some key events right away. Looking at the state of the district to kick things off, looking at October 3rd in the evening for that event. And then we look to have a series of community conversations spread out throughout our district, looking at October 11th, October 17th, and October 26th at 3 different buildings. So they're still working on a 4th date and location, probably off of one of our sites, maybe potentially public library or someplace in the community as well. Give people a chance to provide some feedback as we work through the beginning stages of the strategic plan. So I will get those dates to you, so don't worry if you didn't get those down, but the month of October will be the big focus of one, sharing what our initial thoughts and designs of the plan are, and then giving community members plenty of chance for feedback, and that doesn't even include the survey portion as well, which will be in that window too. So I'm excited to get that going, and part of our moving forward plan for this year.
The October 3rd date is the one where we'll want the entire board, if you're available,
Thank you.
to come to that. The other ones will split up, and just, so you won't have, like, we're not asking you to come to all 5 events in October. But the state of the district, we're taking inspiration from the state of the city that we do every year, where we get an update from the city on how everything's going and what's going on. We're going to do something similar, and so we would like the whole board, if you're available, at that one. October 3rd.
That one is October 3rd.
So it's a Monday
school.
night in between board meetings, so.
Where at and when, or where at and what time?
We have not finalized the exact time yet, but it will be at the high school auditorium in the evening. Just need to finalize a time for that yet. And once we get things nailed down with exact times, locations, we'll certainly be promoting those and sharing those final details too.
Just wanted to get you guys as much notice as possible of at least the dates of when we're working these things in.
That is all I have.
Any questions on any of that? All right. Moving on to unfinished business. We have, at our last meeting, we began our discussion about the proposed bylaw amendment for IASB, and I thought we had a really great discussion. Notice that there's not a vote on here yet. They did just announce that they're going to do a Q&A session this Thursday evening. I was reached out to and asked to come and bring our perspective, so our feedback has been heard, and they would like us to talk about that at this Q&A. So I do have that on my calendar. But
Is that a Zoom call? Or
yeah,
what
it's a
is it?
Zoom webinar thing. Yep. But I did send you guys that summary of the question, the information that I got back from IASB when I submitted our questions about making an amendment to the amendment, which they said no. Only the board of directors can make that amendment, which is why they're having the Q&A session. Not the board, but IASB executive staff don't want to remain independent or neutral for a year. They believe that it would be difficult for them to stay in the know on the federal level if we did that. But they are open to that conversation. And the question of what happens to the dues. It's more prudent to allocate funds to one-time costs for direct services to Iowa school boards, such as special projects or benefits, while we assess the scope of national costs in the coming years. This creates $34,000 in opportunity for the 2022-23 year that the IASB staff have been charged with bringing forward recommendations for appropriate uses of those funds as one-time costs that would provide direct and tangible benefits to members. So that was the other question that this group had, that was the answer. So we don't have to have a big conversation tonight, but I would kind of like to, if you guys do have any thoughts currently, but we will have this on the next agenda to decide how we want to approach the change in the bylaws.
The nice thing about it is that when we have, the Q&A will be over with, so if there's any questions, then it's,
Yeah.
you know, it gives us time to go through that before we have to make a decision, instead of make a decision like tonight, and then have to come back and rehash it and maybe change it.
Yeah,
So
based
I think
on,
it's to our advantage because of the Q&A, and then our next board meeting, make a decision which way we want to go.
yeah.
When are they, excuse me, when are they exactly making this decision?
The delegate assembly is on September 13th, and all member delegates will vote on whether or not the bylaw amendment will pass or fail. The Q&A is to answer questions and to hear feedback, like the feedback that we had suggested. And if any board of directors member of IASBA feels that we have valid points or someone else has valid points, then they could make an amendment at that time to impact some of the changes that we had requested or not.
So you're asking if we have any other thoughts up and above?
I just wanted to provide an
what we
update,
had?
and then if we want to just wait until after the Q&A and discuss at the next board meeting, that's fine. But if you guys do have thoughts at this time, we can talk.
I'm fine with waiting, but I just wanted to say how much I appreciated the response. It was almost the next day that you inquired and got this information. It makes a lot of difference to me knowing that the staff themselves say that it's important to have access to a group such as the National or another in order to keep up on their bi-monthly information from federal, state, and all of that. That was something that I kind of assumed, but when they're making that as a statement of importance, that I thought that was an important thing for us to consider. And the idea of the dues, of the one-time cost things, and coming up with ideas, that's a good idea too. If we have any suggestions, you're going to be a part of the discussion, is that right, on Thursday?
Thursday, yeah.
Okay.
They reached out and said, can you come? And so I said yes. So I'll be on the Zoom call and I will ask our questions again to the full board,
okay.
and bring back any feedback or any new information they share. I will definitely summarize that and give it to everybody.
Is the Zoom call just for the delegates, or is it open to anybody to listen in?
We all got the email. So yeah, if you wanted to.
Okay.
Yep.
This wasn't quite
That I
clear
got the
whether or not
email.
we could all listen.
I don't know that I got that email.
I don't remember seeing anything either.
It just came out
A week ago?
Wednesday night or Thursday morning of last week.
Through my
It was
email
from
again, but I
IASB.
haven't seen that.
Do we want more of us on there, or would it be better off just where we're at and share, as we've done already, share our information with Britt? Because it's going to be this is statewide, right?
Statewide.
There's going to be a lot of people on there probably.
Not that I would have anything necessarily to say, but I
like
think
to listen.
sometimes it's nice to be able to listen and like hear the different perspectives.
The other thing I was just saying or thinking, and I don't know that I have anything, but is there something that we are thinking would be a good use of the money for the one-time amount of money, that extra 34,000 or 32 or whatever? I don't know what the exact amount is, of course, but do we have any suggestions? That might be something we think about. If you listen to the discussion statewide, something might present itself. I don't know, but anybody has a great brainstorm, we should probably bring it forward.
I would just echo everything that I've already said in the last meeting about this. I think this makes me very nervous. I think we are going, it feels like we're changing for the sake of changing at this point, because we really don't know what we're getting in this new cohort. And I can appreciate that it is a bit more expensive to be members of NSBA right now. I would say that I think $32,000 over an entire state is really, that's not the kind of money that can do a lot for a lot of districts or a lot of students. And so that doesn't feel like a good reason in and of itself to jump ship. This new group may be better, but I just think that the prudent thing to do is to wait and kind of see how that plays out. And at that point, we can make a decision, or the state can make a decision. I personally just don't feel comfortable, and I know, I think I've said this before. I don't know, it seems like the motivations are somewhat obscure, particularly since we did vote on this last year. This was voted down last year, and it is now coming up in a special session in order to be able to move on it at the next IASB conference, and it just seems like why the rush? You know, everybody spoke on it. Well, no, I understand that, but everybody spoke on it last year. So, so the motivations seem a little sketchy to me. So that's all I'll say.
I'm going to take all of the concerns that we have to the session Thursday night, everything that we've discussed, all the questions that we submitted. I'm going to ask them again. I think this is good context for all us to consider, but you know, the board wasn't the one that answered our questions, the executive staff was. So I think it's important for our representatives to also hear our concerns and be able to, you know, give their feedback and say, well, this is what we've learned. And so the last part of this is that we do have to sign up our delegate before our next board meeting. They have to be signed up and registered by the 9th. I would be happy to continue my conversations and go as the delegate since I've been in this, but I don't want to just assume that without consensus. So,
my suggestion is you do it. I've done that before. I think it's important that we have some continuity, and you've been in these discussions. But I also think in November, as the delegate, we need to have someone else go along to kind of learn the process, so that that doesn't mean Britt wouldn't do it again the next year, just so that it's just not a surprise the first time someone does it. It just makes more sense, and it makes you more at ease, and it's like, I can do this kind of moment. So just a suggestion.
And I would agree with what Sandra said, for the simple reason, you've been there, you've done that, you're going to already do the Q&A, so you're going to have a really good understanding going in that. It just makes sense for you to do that, because you probably have a better background than any of us going into that, and you'll be able to get through all that information and get it back to us. Okay. But I think that's really important.
So do we make that decision? I mean, I'm okay with you doing it now, but as we're moving forward with a second delegate, will we make that decision in our
we'll talk
fall
about,
planning?
We'll talk about that when we talk about IASB. So, okay. Is that any other questions or anything about the bylaws? This was really more just an update. Okay. I will summarize whatever happens Thursday night and get that out to everybody. Moving on to new business.
A motion to approve setting a public hearing regarding the district tennis court project for Monday, September 26, 2022 at 5 p.m. in the boardroom of the Learning Resource Center.
Second.
A motion by Rachel and a second by Clark. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
I move to approve the open enrollment requests as presented.
Okay.
Motion by Barry and a second by Melissa. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Motion by Melissa and a second by Rachel. Any discussion?
Just one quick question. This is just for my information. We had this job fair, or whatever you call it, for bus drivers earlier this year. Has that been a success? Do we have, I don't want to say enough, but are we okay?
I think the transportation department right now would say they can always use more drivers, for sure. But I think they feel in a much better spot now than they did in May, looking ahead at this time period. I think the margin of error is still pretty small. If people are out for an extended time, that really puts a dent into their procedures. But yes, I think we're at things like the market fair, job fair we did there helped, and different promotions have helped to attract people and retain people as well. So. Yep.
I had a question about 7053. It's the extension of the agreement with Mercy Family Counseling. Is this a one-year contract, do you know,
Yeah, that contract gets renewed on a yearly
on
basis.
a yearly basis?
Correct.
Well, I'm excited to see we're continuing.
And that is a continuation of our current plan that we have as well.
I think we need to do whatever we can and beef up in any way we can things with mental health and the availability for our students and families. So this is awesome. Good.
I've got a question and a couple. First one's Exhibit 705.7. Again, this one, the agreement begins on August 11th of this year, which is several weeks ago, through October 14th. This particular agreement, I know we've had some discussions in some of these in the past, but this agreement was signed on August 3rd, which should have been plenty of time to get it in front of a meeting on August 8th. So I don't know why this continues to come up. Looking for some clarity on that, and think maybe this should be pulled from consent agenda for a vote on its own.
You say which one you're referencing again, Matt? I didn't catch it.
705.7.
0.7? Good, thank you. I don't remember one off the top of my head that was not within the time frame, so I apologize. I do not have that one off the top of my head. This is what I'm looking at. It's the agreement between August 11th and October 14th, so we are in that window for that agreement for that individual. I cannot speak to why it was not submitted or processed before for the last board meeting. I do not have an answer for that.
So
It has the stamp of processing on August 24th, so that's when it went through the system.
Does that mean maybe it wasn't filled right away, or is that?
It could be multiple things. It could be wasn't filled right away. It could be by the time it goes from the band instructors to the high school administration to our business office to the board documents, there's a lag time as it goes through that process as well. And it happened right during the middle of multiple technology challenges we were having too, so I don't know if that was a factor or not, but there's lots of factors that could come into play with that. I do not have the specific answer for that contract.
Well, I guess going forward, what are we supposed to be doing with these contracts? Where the work is being started before it's approved?
We have been working extremely hard to get that straightened out and have made progress in that area. When you have a system of well over 1,000 employees, not everything goes by the book as we'd like it to go.
I do understand that. I do.
We
But
continue to work with the staff too, and we've had a lot of turnover in staff over time too. And for 2 years during COVID, these things did not happen. So it's a matter of getting people back into routine of not just their instructional roles, but also the paperwork roles and management side of their jobs that come with it too. So we've tried to provide people grace on that while still holding people accountable moving forward as well.
And I understand this one is a fairly small amount of dollars, but the other exhibit that I want to talk about, it kind of leads into what the problem could potentially be. Exhibit 705.4 with TIL 360. I've got several questions on this contract. First, what is TIL and what are they going to be doing? There's almost no information in this contract on what this does. This is a fairly sizable contract. You know, it's $11,250 for 2 days of work. So I think I would appreciate a little bit of insight on what this is. I'm curious to know if any of the voting members know anything about TIL, if this has been used. I know I'm new.
Till was the keynote speaker at last year's welcome.
Okay.
His name is Joe Beckman. He was our district keynote speaker at last year's district-wide kickoff for our staff. His message is very much of acceptance, respect for all students and all staff. He did a phenomenal job with our staff. Was kicked off the school year last year. And it led to some conversations of Several of our principals thought and our teachers thought he'd be great to bring to work with our students. So we had a lot of conversations last year to try to make that happen. And his schedule and our schedules couldn't quite align until late spring. And at that time, the decision was made that it's not the best time to bring in somebody like that, because really you want that message to be set early in the school year so they get the benefit of it throughout the year. So late in the year, made a decision to move it to this fall to have him come in. So what you're looking at in that contract is essentially 4 half days in those buildings with students, not just with our staff. Providing assemblies, interaction with our student body on that message of his theme is look up, look away from your phone, engage with others, build relationships, support each other, those type of themes. I can't remember the rest of his message off the top of my head, but that was the basic theme of what he emphasizes and what he presents. And he was compared to our staff listening to me, they would much rather have him come back every year and provide, because his message was very, very powerful and a great way to kick off the district as well. So that's kind of the summary. I don't know, Nathan, if you have anything else to add to it from that agreement, but that's the basic schedule for those.
Everything
is
is
student engagement for this one, not just staff. So that's why the extensiveness of the contract's a little bit bigger than typically would see.
And the description of services does outline the dates in which buildings and how many presentations and the times of all of the activities. So I think the contract is pretty clear on what is going to happen on those 2 days.
One of the lines in this contract is that a 50% non-refundable holding deposit must be received to confirm the client's date. Has that money been sent to Till?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
So
I don't know if that's different than that, but I do not know off the top of my head. Typically, it's not until agreement is made, but I do not know that.
Until it's voted on, we wouldn't normally.
that's something that I would, because that's, again, with that last contract I was talking about, the $850, whatever that was, it's not, a lot. This possibly could be, and sending over $5,000 non-refundable to something that may not get voted on, and we're out that money. And now, I believe within the 30 days, which I think we're in, if it was decided that it didn't get voted on or approved, I believe this contract states that the rest of that money is due.
We can't be liable for, correct me if I'm wrong, Dave, but can't be accountable for a non-refundable deposit on a contract we haven't approved yet. Is that correct? So I mean,
I agree with you.
I mean?
I agree with you, but that's why I asked the question: is has that money been paid? I think that's a pertinent question, and I would appreciate getting that information. Also, with this, it does show that it does have a presentation for the community, which I think is fantastic. I think we need to do that so the community knows what these speakers are doing, what they're bringing into the school. I think it's a great idea. However, I believe those community presentations should be before our students see it, so our parents know if they want their students involved in these sort of things. So if there's any way that could happen first. And I've received several comments on this, is why I'm bringing it up.
What is the concern? Let's just get right to it. What is the concern with this contract?
The concern is, well, before it was even brought to me from anyone, now that you say that he was the keynote speaker, I do recall that, but I went and looked it up to do some research to find out what it is. And there are some pretty alarming things right on their website.
such as what?
A specific quote from the founder of Till was, well, I guess I don't have it written verbatim, but parents should keep their opinions to themselves because it won't change the outcome.
I would need to know the context of that quote.
An exact
I'll
quote, I
find you a
guess.
link and I'll send it to you. But anytime social emotional learning is being brought in, parents want to know what does that really mean, because it seems to be a fuzzy term. I'll use that. On what does that really mean? It seems to be an all-encompassing term for lots of stuff that community members are nervous about. just to be frank. They're nervous about any time that stuff is brought in. It also says something here which really kind of surprises me on this contract, that some students may want to talk to the speaker about personal issues after the event. Looking at the videos of this organization, they talk a lot about mental health. I, as a parent, don't want my student talking to somebody that I don't know about their mental health. Certainly not somebody that we're bringing into the school for a assembly. There's a lot of red flags here that I think something like this needs to be. Parents need to know what the content is, so they feel comfortable with it. And that may be all it is this is really what they do. We're going to show you what they do. This is what they have to say. This is what they're going to bring to our students, and they can feel comfortable about it. Right now, there's a lot of parents that don't feel comfortable with this, and I think you'll see several opting out of sending their students to these types of assemblies without that information. I think we really need to do a better job of relaying and communicating to our community what these types of things are.
So
Certainly have our principals and staff send communications to families ahead of time about what the assembly is, what the focus will be, so they can make that choice as well. He is not a person coming in that we are not familiar with. We've seen him at conferences. We have had him with our staff. He's presented to hundreds of schools. So this is not anything secretive at all. So we can certainly have principals share out what the focus of it is and why we're bringing it in, and they're welcome to come to the, like you said, the community portion of it as well, which for some schools will be after the fact to understand, but that's logistically the way it works, and you have somebody come for 2 days, one night, when that night is structured. But
I hope you understand that I'm not saying this to be combative. I'm relaying information that was brought to me. We've all heard it, or most of us probably have heard him speak and know what it is. A lot of our community do not.
I think it's important to also think about the order of events. We can't, as schools, we can't expect the schools to share information about an event that has not been approved. So my thought would be that we approve the contract, then the schools start sharing, we got approval, we're going to bring this speaker in, here when the event's going to happen. I wouldn't want to get an email that says, we may or may not be bringing in this speaker pending board approval. I mean, so this is like step one. The contract gets approved. Well, step one would have been the knowledge of bringing in the speaker, but you can't communicate out something that isn't approved to happen yet, is I guess where I'm coming from.
I agree that that is a fair point. Is there something in place that would happen? And what does that look like?
We definitely would.
Something that it wouldn't happen, though?
We would definitely
I'm just
communicate.
asking, I'm not assuming anything, I'm asking a question. Is there something in place for these types of events that gets sent? I don't know, I'm a parent, I don't know that I've seen one other than about a year ago of an assembly where we found out it was happening, and then after the fact, when people started questioning it a lot, then something got sent. I'm just trying to be proactive here and getting information out to our community so we can quash any suspicions, anything like that. I think it's important that we do that. And again,
think about when Orchestra Iowa came in last spring. I got an email more than a week in advance letting me know that there was going to be an assembly and the orchestra was going to be there performing, I don't know, Little Mermaid or whatever it was. So I do think there is a process where these things are shared. This one has a community presentation, so that's definitely going to be shared in advance. No, I'm sorry.
Okay, but you have the community presentation on there
Ma'am?
after 2 of the classes are already seen it.
Ma'am, audience cannot, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. I'm going to have to ask you to leave, please.
You're not listening to me.
Officer Dobbs, can you please ask her to leave?
For parents after
I'm sorry, this is under law. You have to leave.
So you're claiming that the parents
You have to leave now, ma'am.
can't see it before my child.
You have to leave now. You've disrupted the meeting
Then
per
maybe
Iowa
just
law.
answer questions. No, don't shush me.
Hey, Matt, let me ask you a question. This is not directly to you, I'm sorry. It's a response to what you just asked. Parents always have the right yet to, if they don't want their child to come to an event, right? Am I correct, Shannon?
Correct. Yep.
You can express that interest to the principal or whoever that is. You know, this is, I guess, you know, I still have a lot of respect for our leadership. I still have a lot of respect for the principals in the buildings and all the teachers in the buildings. And I really don't feel deep down inside those people are going to allow something to come in that they feel is going to be detrimental to all their students in their school. I realize there are going to be some students and or parents that really don't have a desire. You know, as a parent myself and a grandparent myself, I don't completely understand the issue, and I just feel like, you know, you still, as a child and as a parent and as a teacher, have to make the right decisions. And I have reason to believe that a lot of the students, albeit teachers, are going to make that decision. Back to the counseling piece at the end, you know, that's just, I think that's just allowing the students to be as comfortable as they want to be in the facility, as comfortable as they want to be in the setting. And it might bring them to their teacher, it might bring them to whatever, but they just want that opportunity. It's an outside learning environment that I think would be helpful for the school, myself, and for our students, albeit on the heels of what we've been through the last few years. I thought he gave a tremendous presentation, and no, he's not going to be for everybody. So the things that we're going to read, the comments we're going to read online, whatever that is, everybody's going to have an opinion whether they like something or didn't like it. And we have to be so careful because we can wordsmith anything. You know, when I say we, whoever posts some things can wordsmith anything. So back to, I think, what you said, Brett, a few minutes ago is, you know, we and I know we're upset because there needs to be some folks in the community want to be able to see it. But I don't know, like you said, time commitment, whether that's feasible at this point.
The other option that you mentioned, Barry, yes, people could always opt out of something if they're not comfortable. That's not a problem at all. The other piece is they can certainly reach out to building principal to get clarification ahead of time as far as what is the focus of this presentation. Do they have other additional information to provide? That happens frequently. That's certainly something that can be done in this situation or any, as far as what's actually being covered, whether that's a community presentation or additional information ahead of time. You know, that's very much welcomed.
So do I assume that this gentleman has a website and a person can probably even go on there and see their presentation or parts of what he has, or is that not as a
He's
whole?
active on social
Sure.
media. I believe there's a website. I don't know what he actually has on there as far as presentation, but I'm sure we can connect with him and get information to share with people if they have questions.
To answer to that a little bit, I'm sorry to interrupt, but to answer to that a little bit, when I was doing some research, they have several, Till has their own YouTube videos out there, and that's what I was looking at, was their stuff. It wasn't someone else's trying to pigeonhole stuff, it was their stuff. I went to their website to look up the information. And a little bit to your point, Britt, of, you know, when we brought Orchestra Iowa in, this is different. We're not talking about a orchestra coming in to play music. We're talking about people who focus a lot on mental health.
I was just referencing the process of communicating those events,
Right.
not necessarily comparing the two.
Right, but on those events, when Orchestra Iowa comes in, we don't say, this is the music they're going to play. We all know what music they're going to play. Parents don't know what mental health they're going to be talking about to their young children. It is an apple-oranges type of thing, and I think that's where I'm hoping we can do better to close that gap in the community. I think there's a big opportunity in these types of things to do that.
One thing I do want to add is that I do understand that there's a difference between music education and mental health education, but IASB standards still identify that we as a school board and we as an educational body have a responsibility to provide mental well-being services to our students. We have a we have standards that we have set as a board that say that we are going to prioritize mental health as a district and as a board, and that is one of the priorities that we've set for this year as a board jointly. And we have, as a district, said that that's one of our priorities. We just set forth to IASB that one of the things that we want to focus on this coming year as a district is to advocate for mental health. And so while I recognize that there are differences in how people view the means to the end, I don't think that we can side skirt the fact that we are addressing mental health within our schools, because mentally well students are able to achieve high academic standards. Kids who are struggling with their mental health aren't as able to achieve high academics. And we know that's as fact. And so I think part of what we need to be able to get to a point of understanding within the community is that we're not doing any of these things in a way that's trying to cause harm. We're bringing things in that we believe and have vetted out, just like Shannon talked about. We're bringing in known resources that are trusted, that we know will provide great resources for the students in our district. And we're providing information to the families that they can use to determine if they feel uncomfortable with that resource. They can choose to not participate, just like they could choose to not participate in a sexual education class or in a music education class or anything else in the district that they are uncomfortable with. But I think we can't let that detract us from recognizing that this is one of our set priorities and we're moving forward on it.
I won't say that I disagree with any of that, but also when we're talking about bringing mental health, these types of things into our schools, who's bringing them in? The CEO, or the two founders of TIL, one is a teacher and one is a principal. I don't know where the credentials of them speaking on large groups of students' mental health comes from. It's a real concern. Granted, teachers and principals are in the midst of that all the time, but I don't know that makes them experts on mental health. Those are my concerns. I'm just bringing the concerns that the community has brought to me.
The way I address that piece is,
I'm sorry?
Have you reached out at all? I imagine there's like a website or something like that, but I bet that they would, I bet that they would communicate with you about like your specific concerns and about the concerns that you've heard from the community, so that you could, get a better picture of things and either have your concerns allayed or have your concerns, supported by whatever you heard, and then you could pass along that information. I just wonder if you've reached out to them at all.
I haven't yet. I seen this, late Saturday night for the first time, and I haven't had a chance to reach out. That's something I certainly can do, and I will. I'll send an email to see, address those concerns and see what they get back to me on. But that's...
One thing I would add to your comment there, Matt, is he's not coming in as a therapist providing therapy to schools. He's coming in providing a powerful message of acceptance, inclusion, respect. He's not pretending to be what he's not. So when you mentioned his background, you're right, he's not coming as a mental health expert. He's coming as somebody that has experiences he can share and provide inspiration for kids and connection with kids that way. So this is not a group therapy for 600 kids at our middle schools to have. It's opportunity to connect with somebody that has their own unique experiences and their message of respect towards each other. So it's the inspirational aspect of it more than it is a clinical psychiatrist or a mental health professional coming in. This is very middle school level appropriate content. And as far as the engagement aspect of it as well, it's a very engaging, very high level, very high energy, very interesting presentation that he will provide with kids as well. Back to your initial point of making parents aware, absolutely. We can certainly make sure that's a priority for buildings between now and the days when he's coming, and we encourage people to have questions to connect with building principals or with Joe and his team as well, so we can alleviate those questions as best we can. And just about the evening event, that evening event is not for parents, wasn't intended for parents necessarily as a see this to determine if you want your child to be part of the assembly. It's intended to give the parents the same message so they can have the same language and conversation with their kids as well that day and then going forward as well. So it's the intent of that was not for a preview to decide whether they want to or not. We can provide that information for them ahead of time. It is really intended to help educate all the community and all the parents as well, so they can have, when the kids come home and talk about something he says, they can understand where they're coming from and what that conversation can be enhanced, hopefully, at the dinner table.
Just bottom line, we need to communicate to the parents what's happening and let them make the choice.
Absolutely.
Straightforward as we can be.
We have a motion on the table and a second. Any further discussion?
I would like to make a motion to pull 7057.
There is already.
A motion to amend.
You would have to request that of Melissa, who has the current motion sitting on the floor, to amend her motion.
I would like to amend the motion, amend the motion to remove 7057 and 7054 for a separate vote.
I'd like to keep it as stands for now.
So we have a current motion on the floor. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
All right, moving on to board communications. I just have a couple of things. So we already talked about the dates for strategic planning, and Shannon's going to send those out. For IASB, we do need to finalize our attendance, so if you haven't gotten back to Gala about whether or not you're going to go in November, please do that this week. And wanted to do one final call. I had sent out a couple weeks ago the proposal of content for the new board website. I heard back from several, but not everyone, so if anyone has any additional comments before we move forward in putting that into production, please let me know.
I have a request.
Yes.
We need to clarify September 29th, 11:30 board visit. Is it Hazel Point or is it Boulder Peak?
It's not Hazel Point, but I heard others have had Boulder Peak, so let me.
It is Hazel Point?
Hazel Point,
Okay.
29.
Hazel, okay.
Hazel's first, Boulder's second.
All right,
Okay.
I will
Thank you.
make a point to get that switched on my
That's
calendar.
September 29th, not August 29th.
Yeah, I practiced today. I went today, and I went to Boulder Peak, because that's where I thought we were supposed to go. And I'm looking around going, there's no familiar cars here. So I went in and I said something, and I said, if you have no idea the board's coming, then they're not coming, and that's just fine. I just practiced coming. So anyway, we all laughed, and I left and felt like an idiot. But
It was close to home.
it's, well, it was. It was close to home, but, it was the idea, okay, sure. So that's why I'm asking, simply because I obviously messed up.
Nobody else was confused.
I know no one else was confused, but I was just so eager, Barry. I wanted to go ahead of time. That had to be it. So anyway, we're talking Hazel Point on the 29th. Yes. Thank you for the clarification. Appreciate it.
Does anyone want to take the September 8th City Council meeting? I don't have a name written down on here.
I think that was me.
Okay.
In my notes, it was
Okay.
me.
It's just, what's not on the agenda, so I was just double checking. And then September 22nd? Is anyone able to attend that one? I can go, I think. No, I can't. I have to work that night. Sorry. That whole week I'm
Hard to
working.
be two places.
I think I can do it.
Okay. Thanks, Matt. All right.
Move to adjourn at 6:43 p.m.
Second.
Motion by Barry and a second by Melissa. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Meeting adjourned. We will recess for